Jaya Braja Janaranjana Jaya Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Abhihari Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parirajakacharya Stotra Shat Shri Śrimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premanandi Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Chapter 26. Yeah, but that's not. Yeah. Narayanam Namaskritya Narum Chaiva Narottamam Devam Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat Nastaparaya Shabadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. So today we are reading from the Śrimad Bhāgavatam, which means the Śrimad means beautiful, and Bhagavat means about God. Bhagavan is a word that is one word for God. There's many names and descriptions of God. Bhagavan means one who is van, full, and bhaga, or opulence. So people tend to be attracted to so many different kinds of things. Like, obviously, if someone's very physically attractive, that's one thing. But even if they're not physically attractive, if they're very smart, that's attractive. Or, it's always a common thing. The ugly old man has the pretty young little wife because he's very rich. So wealth is also attractive in a certain kind of way. And so there's all these different opulences. But there's always someone that's more attractive than the other person, or there's always someone that's more wealthy than the other person. But there's one person where when you get to them, there's no one more wealthy, no one more attractive, no one more strong than them. And when you find that person is Bhagavan. So that's a name of God. So we're reading from the Śrimad Bhāgavatam, which is a very beautiful book helping us to connect with that person. And it's divided into 12 sections or cantos. And right now we're going through it sequentially. So we've reached the third canto, which has been titled The Status Quo. And we're in the chapter 26 of that chapter, of that canto, called The Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. And I guess we can read the verse and then I can speak a little bit more about where exactly we're at. So we got, that looks right. Artashavatyam sabdasya drashtur lingatvam cha tanmatratvam cha nabaso lakshanam kavayo viduhu artashravyatvam artashayatvam shabdasya artashayatvam sabdasya drashturlingatvam cha tanmatratvam cha nabaso lakshanam kavayo viduhu artashayatvam shabdasya drashturlingatvam cha tanmatratvam cha nabaso lakshanam kavayo vidu. Artashayatvam Shayatvam Shabdasya Shayatvam Shabdasya. Artha Ashravyatvam, that which conveys the meaning of an object. Shabdasya, of sound. Drashtuhu, of the speaker. Lingatvam, that which indicates the presence. Eva, also. Cha, and. Tatmatratvam, the subtle element. And. Cha, and. Nabasaha, of ether. Lakshanam, definition. Kavyaha, learned persons. Vidhu, no. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Persons who are learned and who have true knowledge define sound as that which conveys the idea of an object, indicates the presence of a speaker screened from view, and constitutes the subtle form of ether. Purport. It is very clear herein that as soon as we speak of hearing, there must be a speaker. Without a speaker, there is no question of hearing. Therefore, the Vedic knowledge, which is known as Shruti, or that which is received by hearing, is also called Aparusha. Aparusha means not spoken by any person materially created. It is stated in the beginning of Śrimad Bhāgavatam, Tene Brahma Hrida, the sound of Brahman, or Veda, was first impregnated into the heart of Brahma, the original learned man, Adi Kavye. How did he become learned? Whenever there is learning, there must be a speaker in the process of hearing. But Brahma was the first created being. Who spoke to him? Since no one was there, who was the spiritual master to give knowledge? He was the only living creature. Therefore, Vedic knowledge was imparted within his heart by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated within everyone as Paramatma. Vedic knowledge is understood to be spoken by the Supreme Lord, and therefore it is free from the defects of material understanding. Material understanding is defective. If we hear something from a conditioned soul, it is full of defects. All material and mundane information is tainted by illusion, error, cheating, and imperfection of the senses. Because Vedic knowledge was imparted by the Supreme Lord, who is transcendental to material creation, it is perfect. If we receive that Vedic knowledge from Brahma in disciplic succession, then we receive perfect knowledge. Okay, I think I'll start to speak now because this is a long purport. We'll take it by chunks. But if everyone who knows it, we can chant the auspicious prayers for invocation. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shriuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagarjatam Sahagana Raghunathan Tam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagat Pate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim ratkripatamaham vande Shri Gurundina Taranam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hari Om Tat Sat. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. Especially, I heard we have some journalists from the New York Times that are coming. So I had made my class notes expecting a specific kind of audience, but maybe I have to adjust a little bit. And I'm sorry that we had so many different Sanskrit prayers and all these things that I don't think you know Sanskrit, but at least you can be happy by the fact that they're auspicious to hear, even if you don't understand them. That's one thing about Sanskrit. And it's very nice to hear. And so, like I said, we're reading through the Śrimad Bhāgavatam, which is the book describing the person who is full of all attractive qualities. And we are about a quarter of the way through it in the third canto, and we're in the second half of the third canto, you could say. And in this section, it's basically we're talking about Sankhya, which means division. So this is a dialogue. Actually, the whole Bhagavatam is a series of like dialogues within dialogues within dialogues. But I won't exactly put it all into that huge context. That'll be too much. But in this dialogue, it's one Devahuti, the mother, speaking to her son Kapila. Her son is actually he's an avatar of the divine person. So he's giving her all this knowledge about the material world and about spiritual life, and he's just taught her all about bhakti yoga, or how to actually connect with the Supreme in love, which is the highest form of yoga. And now he's going off to many other subjects which she asked about. And so she asked about the material world. So now he's going and he's analyzing the material world and breaking it down into all its constituent parts and kind of describing them. And so we heard about a thing called the pradhan, which is just the sum total of all material elements. And then he talked about time. Then he talked about consciousness. Then he talked about false ego, mind, intelligence, and the senses. And we have, how many senses do we have? Trick question. What, you said 24? 25 senses? Normally someone would say 5 or 6, right? Right? And if we say 5, we can easily like smelling, hearing, what I see, like what I touch. What am I missing? Yeah, I have a lozenge in my mouth I'm tasting. So that's, and then you could say, sometimes it said there's 6 senses, and the 6th sense is then the mind, which is like all the senses. But the Vedas also say that we have senses of knowledge gathering, which are operated by our intelligence, which is all the ones I just said. And then we have senses of performing actions. So that would be the other 5. So we also have the tongue that is not only tasting, but it's eating. We have our legs, which help us move everywhere. Our arms help us do things. And then downstairs you've got something to evacuate, something to make babies. So that's 5 active senses. And now we're talking about, which is actually a subject that I've been interested in, the elements and their subtle forms, or the Pancha Mahabhutas and their tan matras. And once we get through all of these, then the chapter will be wrapped up by reconnecting all of these material things back with divinity via discussing the universal form, or the Virat Rupa of the Lord. So that's where we were, that's where we're at, and that's where we're going in the Bhagavatam. So now we're talking about, it's the first section. We're going to go through sound and ether, then touch and air, then fire and form, water and taste, and earth and smell. In the Vedic knowledge, or in many more older classical forms of knowledge, they talk about the four elements or the five elements. And I remember learning in like history class, we would like go over the Greeks or the Romans or something like that. And then it would always be kind of like, or you were like learning in chemistry class or something. Oh yeah, they used to think that there was just four elements, water, air, fire, and earth. But now we understand there's a whole periodic table of whatever it is now, 130 or so much, and we have it all classified by how much their atomic structure is and their chemical reactions, and so therefore their knowledge wasn't right. That doesn't make any sense, and our knowledge is right. Which kind of makes sense. Yeah, okay, there's not just earth and fire, and what does even earth mean? What is water? You know, that's only four different things. That's not. What about hydrogen and helium and oxygen and all these? But so now the Vedas, it's describing. It's actually a little bit different than maybe we would first think. Like when we think of sound, if you just go to the dictionary, does anyone know what sound means? Did you took a physics class? I mean, the English word sound, because it's a translation of the word shabda, which is different than, a little bit different than we might interpret when like the English definition of sound. But like anyone just like, okay, so the reporters, sound, what is, like, I mean, just like you learn in like physics class or something, like what is sound? Or yeah. Yeah, like if you look on Google, the first thing it says is a vibration through a medium that you can pick up in with your ear. Or what I hear. Sound, vibrations that travel through the medium of air or another medium and can be heard when they reach a person's or animal's ear. So that's kind of, that's not exactly what the Vedas are saying sound is. Although that's what Prabhupada chose to translate it as, but there's always, when you're translating from one language to the other, there's always going to be a loss of information. Like, we have so many different like double entendres and puns and funny things we can say to each other. And I think people, I don't know Spanish so well, but I know in people that speak Spanish, they have a lot of really funny things. And like Ishan, he comes here and visits us a lot. And he sometimes tell me, and then when I finally get it, I'm like, wow, that's like so funny. But if you try to translate a lot of them, they sometimes don't make any sense at all. Like you have to know the language to actually have it make sense. And so Sanskrit is also like that, where you can translate it and kind of get suitable meaning to just give something, but it's not really going to carry the full weight of when you're actually in the language. So vibrations that travel through the air or another medium and can be heard when they reach another person's or an animal's ear is not exactly the same as something that conveys the idea of an object or indicates the presence of a speaker screened from view. Or in other words, something that can convey an idea and reveal something hidden. The first definition, the English definition, requires the medium of air or the medium of something, whereas sound actually doesn't require a medium. Or you could say it requires the medium of ether or space. Like you could say a sound, like if I'm, in other words, if I search the internet to find the definition of the English definition of sound, that is something that conveys an idea to me. And there's nothing that's going in my ear. There's nothing that's being transmitted through the air, except you could say maybe the Wi-Fi waves, communicating back the ones and zeros of the data. Or if I get my cell phone and I want to phone a friend to win $1 million on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, that's also conveying things, but it's not exactly the same as what we think of as sound. And so we'll go through and we'll actually hear through the next few days about the element and their tan mantra, or their subtle form of how we can understand them, and it'll help us deepen our understanding of like what they're actually talking about. And so this is a comprehensive, all the 130 elements, so to speak, or whatever, however many it is now. Whoever knows chemistry can know the right exact answer, what they're thinking now. But whatever that is, that can also be classified in terms of these 5 elements. And I have a feeling that most of them are actually just earth, because each element compiles into the next one. So we can hear sound through air, because air is the next element after ether, and it has that capacity. So sound can travel through there. Sound can also travel through metal. It can travel under. If you're in water, you ever try to yell at someone underwater? It's kind of funny. You have to like yell really loud, and then they're like, meh, they can't really hear very much, and it's like unintelligible. But you still can. So similarly, all those, or you could even say that what is fire? Is fire electricity? Then you could say, like, if I'm listening to headphones and it's like the electric wires are going through there, maybe the sound's traveling through fire. So like that sound can go through all the different elements, and it's what conveys the idea, and we'll hear more about the different elements. And here in this first paragraph we just read, now it's talking about so there's sound, or I think another like side definition of shabda would be information, because that information will convey the idea of an object, or the presence of a speaker, or presence of hidden information, or something like that. Like even like you can even, like, if people know each other really well. Like there's sometimes, if you're in kirtan, like there was the famous twins, Kishore, Gopal, and Ananta Gauranga, and they're also their little brother. They would all do this. They knew each other so well that looking across each other from the mat, they would just like make movements. And sometimes you have a good friend, you can also do this. Like, you just make some head movements and like dart your eyes somewhere, just like make a little sign, and then like it's conveying so much information that they understand. That's also kind of sound. So all this talking about sound, let's hear about transcendental sound. Vedic knowledge, or known as Shruti, or that which is received by hearing, is called Apurusha. Purusha means person, and so Apurusha means not spoken by any person. And then it's meaning that it's spoken by someone that's a transcendental person. In the beginning of Śrimad Bhāgavatam, it says, Teni Brahma Shrida, that we have the first living entity. The Vedas say that everything came from the spiritual world, and so when the Lord created the world, he decided to put one engineer in charge, and that's Lord Brahma. And he was the first existing person, and he didn't really know how to do it. Then he heard, hearing that from the Lord, as we read in this paragraph, he was the only living creature, therefore Vedic knowledge was imparted to him within his heart by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated within everyone as Paramama. See, there's another way that knowledge can be transported. When someone's really teaching you, whatever they're saying, it ultimately creates an impression like in your heart, and then you really can remember it, especially if they're conveying like a very deep idea, like poets, through the way that they can juggle the words and put it on there. They can convey something much more deeper than just like mundane writing. And so somehow the Supreme Lord had imparted knowledge of how to do everything to Brahma. And Prabhupada's mentioning here how Vedic knowledge is free from defects. So there's different kind of defects. First of all, the speaker could be making a mistake. 1 + 1 is 3, and then that's it. There's like not really any knowledge. The knowledge is wrong. There's all these kind of prepositions we can make about information. Or he could be cheating. The answer is that I did not have any connections with that woman at all. Something like that. Or he could have not perceived it properly because he has imperfect senses. Yes, the sun is the size of a silver dollar, because when I hold up a silver dollar, it completely, perfectly blocks the sun. Or maybe they're not making a mistake. Maybe they're not trying to cheat you, and what they're conveying is properly understood by you. But because they're an illusion, it doesn't really matter anyways. You should buy mellow yellow. Mellow yellow is the best drink to buy. It's very tasting, good tasting. It's like useless information. And so Vedic knowledge is knowledge coming from outside of the illusion, outside of the defective individuals, outside of the material world. And so if we take it, then we can save a lot of time. And not that we just take it on blind faith. We have to have a little bit of faith that, okay, this may be something useful, maybe something good. But then when we actually take it, we can get the knowledge, we trust it, we act on it. But by acting on it, we can verify the knowledge. We can realize the things that are being explained in there. And there's some basic things that the Vedas might say about the material world. If we act on those, we can realize them more deeply. And then there's transcendental things, which we can verify within our own consciousness. Like we chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and it's supposed to purify our consciousness. So if you ask the scientists, what is consciousness? They're just going to give you a lot of blabber and a lot of fluff, and probably not give you a good answer. What to speak of how to like dissect it and how to transform it and change it. They're going to have no idea. But the Vedas say, okay, consciousness is this. I mean, we recently went over the chitta. It's located, in this area. It's this kind of material. It's subtle. It's not gross. It's not like this table. I can't like touch it. But it can be dirty or clean, and then we can do certain things to help make it more dirty or more clean. And they say cheto darpana marjanam, that the consciousness gets cleaned by hearing transcendental sound. Specifically, if we're referring to hearing the holy names, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So that's why we chant a lot, and we chant different prayers and different things a lot, because that's what can help us get clean. And by doing that, we can just hear it. Okay, I guess I trust that hearing transcendental sound helps me get my consciousness clean. But then if we don't do anything about it, then our own consciousness will remain dirty. But then if we try to do it, we can see the more I do this, the more that my consciousness get away from things like lust, greed, anger, envy, and go more towards serving, more towards love, more towards being able to think about the Supreme Lord, think about higher topics, think about helping others, rather than self-centered, what I want, sense gratification, all these different things. And we can see that, well, at least I can see, I can't speak for everyone, but I can see that it's worked for me, and I've seen it work for many others when they apply it. And I've also seen it, like in a scientific way, you have different ways to check if something's the actual active principle. When someone's doing it, it works, and then when they stop doing it, it stops working. Like if I chant a lot one day, then I feel really good that day. If it's like really good chanting, I feel so good. But then on a day where like I'm like trying to like sleep while chanting at the same time, or looking on my phone or something, then that day I don't. It has much less of an effect. So we can get this knowledge, but if we trust it, then we should act on it, and then we can actually get the result. What the result is very nice. And Lord Brahma is trying to learn about the spiritual world. Here, we can go to the next paragraph in the purport. Every word we hear has a meaning behind it. As soon as we hear the word water, there is a substance, water, behind the word. Similarly, as soon as we hear the word God, there's a meaning to it. If we receive that meaning, an explanation of God from God himself, then it is perfect. But if we speculate about the meaning of God, it is imperfect. Like one example of speculation, like if you go to whatever chapel that is, where Michelangelo painted like Adam reaching his hand out to God, and God is this like balding guy with like gray hair and seems very old. That's like a speculation about God. The speculation goes as follows: God is the origin of everything. God is therefore must be older than everything. Therefore, if we're depicting an image of God, it must be some old man. And like that's not right. God is the oldest, but he is also Nova Yovanam. He's the freshest. So it's not, you can't, and that's not just from speculation. That's from the Bhagavad Gita. We can hear from the Bhagavad Gita is another. We hear that word Bhagavan again. Bhaga meaning opulence, Van meaning full of. So Bhagavad Gita, Gita means song. So the Śrimad Bhāgavatam is the book about Bhagavan, and the Bhagavad Gita is the song sung by Bhagavan. So Gita means song. So, or like as the rap song of God. He wrote that, right? Yeah, that's he made it all into bars. And actually, it's in Sanskrit bars already, but they made it into English bars, and it's pretty dope actually. So Bhagavad Gita is the science of God spoken by the personality of God himself. This is perfect knowledge. Mental speculators or so-called philosophers who are researching what is God will never understand the nature of God. The science of God has to be understood in disciplic succession. So the infinite can never really be approached by the finite, and the finite can never really understand the infinite because there's something finite and you can't shove an infinite thing into a finite thing. So we're finite and God is infinite. But if the infinite is truly infinite, by its inconceivable potency, it can reveal itself, if it so chooses, to the finite. And that's the kind of difference between knowledge built up by speculation and knowledge coming down from above, received. Like if someone's knocking at the door and I'm saying, who is it? And then I'm like, okay, wait a second. Let me try to like hear the sound of the knock. And if I hear the sound of the voice, maybe I can guess who it is. And there's so many ways. Maybe I'll get it right. Maybe I'll get it wrong. But if the person just says, I'm so-and-so, and I trust them, then okay, that's it. That's who it is. I can save a lot of time by just accepting it. And so similarly, God is revealing himself through many different ways, including the Bhagavad Gita and Śrimad Bhāgavatam. And if we accept that, then we can understand it. If we speculate, then we can't really understand it. It says, Pantas tukoti shatavatsara sambragamyo, that we can go on speculating at the speed of our mind for billions of years, and we'll never really be able to approach the Lord, because the Lord is known as avanchintya tattve. So chintya means conceivable, and achintya means inconceivable, and avichintya means completely, like, you'll never get it. But somehow, even though it's inconceivable, we can still conceive whatever we can conceive of it by the mercy of that, and by the mercy of that inconceivableness. So we have our philosophy is called achintya beda beda tattva, that simultaneously it's our knowledge. Well, this goes like the duality of God and the world is God is one with the world and separate, and it's inconceivable to understand it. So inconceivability is a part of the universe. We have just had to accept that we can't ever really grasp everything, but we can grasp enough to deal with it and go to where we're going and get done what we need to do. We don't just need to like dig our whole head in the sand and fall asleep. And so the science of God has to be understood in the disciplic succession of Brahma, who was the first instructed about knowledge of God by God himself. We can understand the knowledge of God by hearing Bhagavad Gita from a person authorized in disciplic succession. So one time they're asking Prabhupada, what is like the coolest Vedic technology? Because there was this, you hear about the Vimanas and these like gigantic flying castles, and we just heard about it in the Bhagavatam, and these gigantic weapons that destroy, Brahmastra, it's like similar to a nuclear bomb in its devastation, but it has more pinpoint accuracy, and all these amazing things that sound like technology that, they're speaking about it 5,000 years ago, like it's just everyday stuff, and now today we're like, what the heck? We don't even have that. And so, but then Prabhupada, he answered in his typical way that no one would really expect. He said, the best Vedic technology is Guru Parampara, or disciplic succession, because that is the way that, like if you've ever played telephone game, if I whisper in Narada Muni's ear some like secret message, and then it goes all the way around, by the time it gets to you guys, I mean, it's always hilarious, right? It'll be something completely different because of so many different things. Maybe someone cheated and they heard exactly what the thing was right, but they decided to just change the entire thing. Or even if everyone tries their best to say the right thing, they might have misconstrued a word here or there or forgotten if it's like a long paragraph. And then by the time it gets to you guys, then it's who knows what it is. So the parampara, the disciplic succession, is basically personalities who are empowered to actually just transmit the message. Like we have the Bhagavad Gita, and what Prabhupada called his translation, because there's actually so many translations, even when he translated it in the 60s, he called his as it is, because he's not trying to bring in any speculation, he's just trying to bring down the knowledge from the disciplic succession. So it's like if lawyers are in a court battle, they have to quote from the previous decision, and if they quote the proper things, then they can easily convince the judge and the jury that this decision should be made like this based on this precedent, this thing, and in this ruling, and this law. And so similarly, all of what Prabhupada's saying, you can always trace it back to something the previous acharyas or previous gurus in the disciplic succession are saying. And it's not just him like twisting his mind, trying to give something new, and in that way spoiling the whole thing. Whereas in many of the other ones, it was just someone just trying to say their whatever they thought, whatever they wanted to put, which may be interesting, but it's, if you want something seriously spiritual, it's not very helpful. And so they say, when we speak of seeing, there must be form. This is the last paragraph. By our sense perception, the beginning experience is the sky. Sky is the being in a form, and from sky, other forms emanate. Therefore, the objects of knowledge and sense perception begin from the sky. So like I said, there's the descending thing of the ether and sky, or ether or sky. Sky is the just translation of ether. Then sound, and then from that becomes air and touch, then fire and the sight, then water and taste, then earth and smell. So if you get a drink of water that has some, let's say we put some it's like water from the Charanamrita and we're drinking it. Is that the element water? No, because we can smell it. So if we just think of like H2O, is H2O what modern science and chemistry calls water? That's not exactly the same thing as what water is in the Vedas. And similar with all these, water is that which gives taste. So any taste that we have is water. Water, another name for water is rasa. And an interesting thing I was just hearing, right before this we chanted Sri Guru Charana Padma. So the Guru is known as, his lotus feet are coming out, he's coming out of the lotus. So why lotus? Because the Guru is absorbed in the rasa of the Supreme Lord, and therefore he's growing out of that and distributing nectar everywhere, just like the lotus. So yeah, because water is also rasa. And so the beginning of all these things is the sky, and objects of knowledge and sense perception and sound come from the sky. So just how sound is like the beginning of everything, and sound is, it's in the Bible, in the beginning there was the word, or the sound is generally considered the first thing. So that sound will start the whole material world, but similarly, transcendental sound can open up and transport us to, and be the beginning of our transportation to the spiritual world. And like we're saying in the translation here, sound is that which conveys the idea of an object. So we want to be conveyed the ideas of these previous acharyas, like what is their experience? They're having such ecstatic experiences. If you read about Narottam Das Thakur or Bhaktivinoda Thakur, it's amazing. And it's said that their poems, their bhajans that they wrote, their songs that they wrote, are like they're conveying such like beautiful ideas that they're like thunderbolts to the steel frame hearts of those that normally don't melt when coming in contact with like various things. So like, if we're trying to come in contact with the transcendental sound, it's not having much effect because our consciousness is so hard-hearted, and we're so covered over by so many different things. We can focus on the ideas in the bhajans of the previous acharyas. And that's like a thunderbolt's coming in contact with our heart, like slowly melting it. You know, if a thunderbolt comes in contact with sand, it just like glasses it. So then if we're struck with their ideas, then we can, so to speak, that's like the beginning of, like material sound is the beginning of the universe. Those spiritual sounds is the beginning of our entrance into the spiritual universe. But then, again, on the other side, then we just hear all these mundane ideas and hear the ideas from people that are just speculating and things like that. Those will sprout more things and be the root and the beginning of further, binding us to the material world. And so it's 8:51. I think I've rambled on enough. If there's any comments or suggestions or questions or reflections, I hope I can do them justice.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Ladies first, huh?
I have two questions. The first one, why you mentioned the disciplic succession, and you also gave the example of the telephone and how things get totally different. So why did?
Okay, yeah, so like a telephone game, you know the telephone game, right? Yeah, so that's like mundane knowledge. It's kind of like you or just speculating. People can say whatever they want and do whatever they want. It ends up nothing. So the speciality of the disciplic succession is that it's not like that, because the individuals are very powerful people like Srila Prabhupada, and they're just, all they're trying to do is perfectly convey the meaning that's coming down through that. So that's why it's like the most amazing technology that Prabhupada said, because it's actually able to convey that meaning. And the Lord, He specifically empowers individuals, and we can see that in their lives. They're like, they're actually empowered to be able to convey these things. And one note is that the Vedas are known as Shruti and also Smriti. So Shruti is specifically referring to the four Vedas, which is like an exact set of Sanskrit words that there are people that have them memorized forward, backwards, upside down, inside out, in such a way that like it's just locked into their memory, and they have like generations that do this. But we're not actually so much into the Shruti, but the Śrimad Bhāgavatam is known as part of the Smriti, or that which is remembered, which when you remember something, you're kind of remembering the essence of it. And so that's also what the disciplic succession, at least the Gaudiya Vaishnava's disciplic succession is giving. It's giving like the essence of everything. Like, what is the essence of everything? The essence of everything is to love God. And so like that, all the acharyas, they have love of God, so they can give love of God. And that way the message does not change. But if they don't have love of God, if, like, for example, I don't really have love of God, but if I just repeat simply what I hear from the previous acharyas without trying to twist too much of my own stuff into it, then that is giving a good message. But if you actually have love of God, then you can perfectly give that. So that's what the disciplic succession is, not like the telephone game.
Okay, thank you. We can accept like this spiritual aspect, like, because not relating it to mundane things, because they are spiritual beings empowered like that. So then I'm also curious, when in the beginning you were talking about what Śrimad Bhāgavatam means, and Bhagavan you were saying is one who has full in opulence, and then you mentioned three very like mundane things like wealth, like money, physical beauty, and then strength. And so I'm curious, why do we relate to God in this like mundane way? Why don't we think more about His internal?
So this is a common thing. God is actually known as as formless, and there's different ways to describe God. But this is not to say that He doesn't have a form. It's to say that He doesn't have a material form. So similarly, all these qualities like wealth and strength and things like that, these are simply qualities. They become material when like basically one definition of the material world is that it has a beginning and it has an end. And so actually all things, all wealth actually belongs to the Supreme Lord. He's actually the most wealthy person. So someone like Bill Gates, he's so-called wealthy because he had his idea, which even his own ideas, like the Lord is the one that gives us ideas, the Lord is the one that helps our intelligence. He had some ideas how to make Microsoft, and then it became a big company, and then everyone thought that that company is worth so much money because he had so many shares of the stock, then therefore he's considered so many billions of dollars wealthy. Whereas actually all those things belong to the Lord. So wealth is not in itself material, or even like beauty. Like beauty, you have material beauty, but then like a flower, you can pluck a flower and it's very beautiful, but then after a few days it gets all crinkly and dry. And similarly, everyone here, we may be young, we may have our youthful beauty to us, but then as we get older, the collagen is less in the skin and so many things, and we start to get the wrinkles and we have to get injections and but then when you get very old, then you become ugly. So it's beauty can be material like that, but then there's also spiritual beauty. And so spiritual beauty is it says in the Vedas, like there's higher planets that aren't necessarily spiritual, like the planets of the demigods, where the people there are much more beautiful than the people here. And it said that if you took the most beautiful person here and compared them, it'd be like a frog compared to their beauty. So that's like a comparison of relative material beauty. But even the most beautiful person in the material universe, their beauty is completely eclipsed by spiritual beauty, which we can only say about it. How can we even imagine it? So there's also the spiritual beauty, and strength. Also, everyone has some amount of strength, but for example, if you're Bhagavan, then you have the strength to do anything. Like, and Krishna showed that in his. We're about to celebrate it on next Friday. Oh, 2 days on Monday. Okay, good. I have to cook something for that. I'm glad you reminded me. On Monday, we have Govardhan Puja, which is celebrating Krishna lifting up a whole mountain. So we see all these, like, the world's strongest man, and there's like a few guys that have lifted weights their whole life and eat so much protein, and they can like pull a whole airplane by themselves, or like bench press a car or something like that. And it's like, okay, that's pretty amazing. He's very strong. But Krishna, without any practice or doing anything, just to have fun with his friends and save them, he just lifted up with his pinky finger an entire mountain, which is like inconceivable. Like, how do you even think of, like, if I lift something up, like I could probably lift this up, but if I have to lift it up from the edge, it's very difficult. So if you have to lift up the whole mountain to get under it, that's a strength that is inconceivable. So all these different qualities, like also being smart, that's another quality. It's not necessarily a material quality. It can be a material quality, but everything ultimately originates in spiritual things. So there are ultimately spiritual qualities. Like in the beginning, I was saying the Lord doesn't have a form, but he does have a spiritual form. He doesn't have a material form like we understand. Like in the Ishopanishad, is saying the Lord does not have veins. He does not have legs, but he can run faster than anyone, but he's just walking. So it's like, sometimes it's hard to understand spiritual things because some people think that spirituality is merely just the negation of everything material. But spirituality is actually, it's kind of like, it's something transcendental. That's the way to understand it, not just the negation. Does that make sense? Are you satisfied? Yeah, these things contribute. Like if you hear more about the Lord and his a connection with everyone and his pastimes, that contributes to his beauty, and we become more attracted. Or if we hear about his exhibition of strength for the sake of his devotees, that gives us more attraction to him. If we hear about like the different opulences that he has, that helps us. And actually, they say the poets, they can't, when you compare anything to the Lord, you actually are doing the Lord a disservice, because that thing is not actually, like it says the Lord has a moon-like face. But it should say the moon is similar to the Lord's face, except it's much worse. Like you can never make the poetic comparisons can never be on par. So, but we have to try anyways, and that helps us. Yeah.
I just had a question, because the verse says, "Persons who are learned and who have true knowledge define sound as that which conveys the idea of an object." So I'm just wondering, you come into a Hare Krishna temple, and all day long you hear everybody inside chanting Hare Krishna. What is the idea being conveyed through that sound?
It says Golokera Premadan Harinam Sankirtan. So the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is like a seed that's trying to convey the spiritual reality, which consists of the Supreme Lord and all his associates having pastimes where like they're all completely in love with each other in different relationships, like friend and parents and lovers and servants, and they're just having the most wonderful things. And so this Maha Mantra is trying to just convey that. That's like in the most deepest sense. If we just focus on the words of the Maha Mantra, it's 3 words put into 16 words. So Hare is Krishna and Rama. Hare is referring to the energy of the Lord, and Krishna is referring to the Lord who is the possessor of that energy. And Krishna also means very attractive, the most attractive. Like Karshati means that which can attract. So Krishna is the one who can attract everyone by all his different qualities. And Rama, that means pleasure. So if you are in connection with the Lord's spiritual energy and serving the Lord, like basically the Lord's spiritual energy means his service. If you're doing that, then you're in connection with the highest pleasure. Because as a constitution, we are souls. We're not our bodies. We're not our minds. We're not all these different things. These are temporary coverings. But ultimately, we're a soul, and the nature of the soul is to be a servant of the Lord in love. And so, when we chant Hare Krishna, we're basically calling out, "Please engage me in your service." And then it's basically taking us away. Right now, we're serving so many material things, and it's going to upset us. But if we engage in this service of the Supreme Lord, then that's the thing that will give us the highest form of pleasure, which we're actually seeking. Everyone's searching for pleasure, but they're looking in the wrong direction. But if they approach pleasure through service of the Lord, then that's the right direction. And we've gone 4 minutes over. Normally I hardline stop it at 9, so I'm very sorry, everyone. I'll fast today. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to fast, but Hari Om Tat Sat. Thanks a lot. Śrimad Bhāgavatam Ki Jai.